All right, we are taking a look at every team's 2024 as a whole before we tick over into 2025. Today, it's the Crom. So, before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you think Adelaide's season went this year. But let's crack in. This season review is brought to you by Skills Beast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, Skills Beast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And to break this down for me, Darren Parkin, AFL commentator and analyst. Darren, I had Adelaide making the 8 at the start of this year.
So did I, hand up. And they would have made it in 2023 if not for I know there's a million moments in a season, but the contentious goal umpiring decision that came in the last minute of the last game, or second last game rather, against Sydney in that season. They would have actually taken Sydney's spot in the 8 had they have won that game. So they were that close. And that was built largely over their firepower. They were the highest scoring team in the comp, had the 4th best percentage, and a lot of more learned experts than me rank percentage as being the biggest indicator as to how good a side is, their balance between attack and defence. They were the 4th best percentage last year. This year they dropped away remarkably in scoring, about 2 goals a game on average, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's enough to move them from the highest scoring team in the comp to the 12th highest scoring team in the comp. And their percentage dropped from 117 to 99 as a result of that. And their top 5 goal scorers last year kicked nearly 200. It was down to 163 this year. Taylor Walker, the biggest factor in that, 47 less goals for the season. A few less from Rankin. He got suspended late in the year for quite a bit and also moved a bit more into the middle, so was always going to kick a bit less. But yeah, and their delivery inside 50 certainly struggled over the course of the year. And yeah, from 0-4 a month into the year, it was over pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's some brutal numbers when you look at it compared to last year. So let's get to the 2024 pass. So as we were saying, coming into 2024, expectations were pretty high considering they just missed out on finals. So the pass mark for them this year, what were we thinking? Like they should have been playing finals.
Yeah, and potentially hosting from 5th or 6th, getting a final in Adelaide, then winning one and pushing. I mean, they won 8 home games last year, lost 2 by less than a kick. So you would have thought they were a decent chance to win the majority of home games and then only need to pick up 2 or 3 on the road to play finals. But it was that home record early in the year that let them down. They lost home games to Melbourne and Geelong early in the season, Richmond as well, beating them early in the year too. So that really did. Essendon, I think, beat them by 3 points in the early part of the year. So just that inability to protect that record. And yeah, they were one of the bigger underachievers of the season. In terms of slide, you look at St Kilda and Melbourne as a couple of other sides that slid, but St Kilda's case, expectations maybe weren't as high, and Melbourne certainly underachieved to a degree. But we've discussed 1,000 times a lot of mitigating factors around them. But yeah, the Crows certainly fell short of the mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's pile on with some more lowlights. So looking at the lowlights, I think we'll start with their 0-4 starts of the season. Pretty bad.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they beaten by the Gold Coast, tricky away fixture early, got beaten by Fremantle, but lost those home games that we mentioned to start the year as well. And at 0-4, they were almost the first side gone, probably North and maybe West Coast that we anticipated. But for a side expected to play finals, to have your season almost over a month in was extremely disappointing. And in terms of how it happened, so their midfield, there's been a suggestion that they struggle for depth in the middle. I thought that they had a bit of firepower and their defence was young, but 15th for clearance differential, 13th for conceding scores for clearances and for scoring from them. And if you look at their best midfielder in terms of average clearances, it's Matt Crouch, who missed a bit of footy with a shoulder, but he turns 30 in April. So Dawson was okay, but not at the level. He was magnificent in 2023. And then obviously Tex nearing the end of his career. He probably had the best season of his career in 2023. Fell back to the pack in 2024, and he's been a wonderful servant, but he's clearly on the other side of the hill now. So, just a few things happened at once that saw them slide.
Yeah, I think you see it a lot with teams that do have a poor start to the season. They just sort of lose confidence in, I guess, all aspects of the game. But then you look at someone like Brisbane, last year who we famously in one of our shows, Hard Knocks, had written them off halfway through the year, as did a lot of other people. So it is recoverable, but maybe Adelaide just don't have that ability yet in they are, not as battle hardened as a Brisbane. So let's look at the highlights now, because I think we have brutalised Adelaide a little bit too much. So some highlights for the Crows this year. My personal one was seeing Riley Thilthorpe come into the side, who just looked like an absolute, as you said, like one of the guys from Sons of Anarchy. And massive.
Yeah, I went to Charlie Dixon's barber, I think, during his time away. But yeah, his first game back, he actually started as a sub in the wet against St Kilda, which raised a few eyebrows that you had a key position player as sub, but he kicked 2 in the last quarter and helped them win that game, and kicked 15 in his last 7 after returning, and he's a guy that's got a pretty bright future for them. So a couple of their other positives would have actually frustrated them a little bit. They had some good road wins over Essendon and Carlton, where they showed terrific resilience. The Essendon win late in the year was incredible when Rashali kicked the winning goal. And they beat Carlton, who were undefeated in round 5, and then 3 weeks later lost to Richmond at home, which is why it would have frustrated their supporters so much. They ran Collingwood very close at the MCG again. I think it's the 3rd time in a row they lost to them by less than a kick. Really good showdown win over Port the first time they met. And then just some individuals. So Ben Keys and Darcy Fogarty, they kicked 56 between them last year. They went up to 75 in 2024. Keys' second half of the year was terrific. And Saligo, going into more of a permanent midfield role, had about 160 more touches for the year and looked perfectly at home in that part of the ground. So there was still a bit to like about what they were doing, the Crows. But some of the good performances would have made them scratch their heads at the bad ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but those were highlights. All right, and this next segment is brought to us by Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kicks. So, who transformed their game in 2024 for the Crows? We talked about him just a second ago. Saligo into the middle.
Yeah, and they're going to bring in another good young kid. They need to blood more midfielders. It's where they've sort of lacked depth. Obviously, Rory Sloane retiring opened up a bit of a hole there as well. But Saligo going in there, 506 disposals for the year, ranked 3rd at the club, averaged 22 a game. So he was a real positive for them. And, he's a guy that, along with Dawson and Draper and some of their emerging young players in there, can help build that next generation of midfielders. So he was a definite tick.
Well, there's one thing we know at Zero Hanger, it is headlines. And for the Crows this year, their major headlines were around Josh Rashali. Now, this isn't what you were going to say, but Josh Rashali actually slid into our DMs after Gather Round when I posted a video of him DJing. So is that what this one was about? Was it DJ Josh Rashali?
DJ Josh Rashali, yeah. It was interesting. He doesn't mind the old, we were talking about DMs, social media played a part in this as well, where he was dropped after the showdown against Port late in the year when he was going okay. He'd kicked that winning goal against the Bombers not long before that. He obviously made some comments in that game about Port fans not having teeth and all that sort of stuff, which is a bit of banter that you would expect in a showdown.
I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's quite amusing, and he said he didn't mind getting booed going forward, but he was left out, and look, people speculated, was it because of that? But the club said that there were other standards he wasn't meeting, but didn't necessarily elaborate on what they were. Then, interestingly, I think on Instagram, a certain news report suggested that he'd been hung out to dry by his club, and he actually liked that post. Now, it's amazing how we talk about social media these days, but for him to like a suggestion that the club had handled it unfairly was interesting. But they certainly didn't handle it well, letting that come out in public. I think multiple times Matthew Nicks had to replace a player at a press conference because they knew all these questions were coming, so he had to do it. But yeah, they always say that bad clubs leak sometimes and good clubs don't. I think the Crows would have been disappointed with how that came out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, coming from a Melbourne fan, it felt like Adelaide were the equivalent of Melbourne over in South Australia, where there was just so much stuff coming out that they clearly did not want to come out, and it just made a little bit of a mess of the whole thing. So yeah, there's some headlines for Crows. Ins and outs for Adelaide. So players gained. This one hurt my soul a little bit when it happened, but it was always going to happen at some point. Alex Neil-Bullen joining from the Ds, obviously going back for family reasons, which you can't really blame him for. But I think he is going to bring a really good standard, always a really good trainer. especially for that younger midfield coming through.
Yeah, the ins probably outweigh the outs, and I say that with due respect to Rory Sloane, who's probably the best player on this entire list. But if you look at his age and injuries, his time was done in that sense. But if you look at who's in, Neil Bullen, forward mid, as you say, really hard worker. They get the pair from the Giants in Peatling, who's looked pretty good when he was used in a number of different roles. Isaac Cumming, another one who comes across. Then they get Sid Draper at pick 4, the local boy who was desperate to play for the Crows. And they get Tyler Welsh, son of Scott, who won their goal kicking 4 times through the 2000s. So pretty good ins. And apart from Rory Sloane, who we mentioned, Elliot Himmelberg goes to the Suns via free agency, and then they delist Hamill, McHenry, Parnell and Gallant. So I think their list comes out of that period better than it started. So they'd be pretty pleased with what they can work with there, particularly in terms of what it does to their midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from memory, what I remember of the Giants, those 2 recruits from the Giants, is that they really wanted to keep coming in Peatling. They just couldn't afford to, and I think that's a really good sign for Adelaide. All right, heading into 2025, if you were a Crom fan, what would you want from Matty Nix's boys?
Yeah, if they bolster that home record again, so most of their season was shot with that start. They kind of went 50-50 after about the first month, and their home record went from 8-4 to 5 from 12 this year. So if they can get back to that 8-4, 9-4 record in Adelaide, bearing in mind they played 2 showdowns, so they'll get an away game there as well, and the extra game for gather round. They go 9-4 at home, which is not out of the realms of possibility. Then they've only got to go, say, 3-7 on the road or 3-6 on the road, and they can give themselves a decent chance of playing finals. Look, if I was to line up a top 8 right now, I wouldn't tip them, but there's certainly a chance, and I think the expectation internally would be that they make the finals for the first time under Matthew Nix.
Yeah, I think for me, they have one of those big ranges where they could go anywhere from 6 to 15.
Yep, correct.
But yeah, you'd want them to bounce back somehow in 2024. So a disappointing year for the Crows, but they, as you said, they did a lot of work in November, and the trade period to turn around. It's not looking as bad coming into the end of 2024 as it is, as it was in the middle of the year, I guess.
Yeah, they're better than they showed, but as you say, I think the range, that their consistency is a bit of an issue. They're a hard side to absolutely nail down, but they're a side that's capable of more than they delivered.
Yep, absolutely. So let us know in the comments how you think Adelaide are going to fare next year. What did you think of this year? Was it a pass? Was it not? I think most people are going to agree that it wasn't. Like, comment, subscribe, and catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by SkillsBeast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.